welcome to episode 146 of the CRICKETher Weekly. I've got my tea this week in my new mug, Sid, that I got for Christmas. Really, we should be sponsored by Emma Bridgewater because it's a really nice mug. Anyway, that was a bit random.
Shout out to all fans of Raf's tea mug.
Shall we talk about some cricket, Sid? There's been some big news that's broken this week about the women's IPL that we'll come to in a minute. But first of all, we're going to tackle the announcement of England's World Cup squad, which happened this week. And it looks quite similar to the T20 squad that played out in the West Indies and was very successful. But they have made a few sort of twiddles, a few tweaks, you might say. And it's quite interesting, some of the selections. So let's start by talking about the fast bowling, because that is a particularly interesting one given John Lewis's kind of background. Now, he's gone with, he's obviously got Catherine Brunt in there, Lauren Bell is in there. That's very much as expected, because as we said, certainly I think that those two are going to be the ones who are going to be opening the bowling for England in that World Cup. He's also got Freya Davies in there, which is no surprise given how well she bowled in the final T20 in particular. But the big one that's possibly a bit surprising is that he's gone with Kate Cross, is going to be in the T20 squad. She hasn't played a T20 international since the end of 2019, I think it was, against Pakistan, so that's quite a while. And Izzy Wong is not in the main squad. She is going as a travelling reserve, but as we were told this time last year when it came to the 50 over World Cup, it seems unlikely that the travelling reserves are going to play unless something very bad happens to a number of the players in the main squad. It's a sort of extra COVID cover, basically, isn't it?
They'd have to withdraw someone from the main squad in order for the travelling reserve to play. They can't just shuffle them in. So
Kate Cross has sort of almost usurped Izzy Wong in terms of the fast bowling pecking order.
Yeah, I mean, some big calls are starting to be made, and John Lewis is making them in terms of those fast bowling places. It's interesting to think back a year ago that neither Lauren Bell nor Izzy Wong have made their international debuts. Obviously, Lauren Bell was the one that got taken as a travelling reserve herself to the World Cup, but unsurprisingly, as you just said, didn't play. And so they both made their debuts together, and they were seen as very much, competing for the same place. And I think that John Lewis has here quite clearly now gone, Lauren Bell is, the player that I'm looking at now.
Yeah.
She's going to be my main fast bowling option here. He's not totally dismissing Izzy Wong, and he's obviously, thinks that there's still a lot of potential there, but he's definitely seeing her as the potential player for the future, whereas Lauren Bell is the player for now.
Yeah.
And that's quite a big call to have made. And I think that, he's not taking any kind of, he's actually looking at the stats, looking at the numbers, looking at people's performances. He's not looking at the hype or who might bowl at 80 miles an hour at some point in the future. He's going, who's performing now? And he seems to be coming across quite no nonsense.
Yeah.
No, I've been impressed with the decisions that he's making, really, because he's not falling for anything. He's making solid decisions which appear to be have a basis in reality and in stats and in what's actually happening on the pitch. So I think that he's making the right calls, and I feel quite positive about it.
And I guess with regard to Kate Cross, he's seen the way that she bowled in ODIs and has kind of gone, oh yeah, I think we might have some of that in T20 cricket.
Yeah, well, I mean, given that she's been, totally at the top of her game, and I think I said after that match at Lord's, last summer, which obviously overshadowed by certain incidents, that's the best I've ever seen Kate Cross bowl. Yeah. I know that personally she was a little bit disappointed at the end of that game, and she was like, oh, I should have taken 5 wickets, blah blah. But that doesn't take away from me that I've never seen her bowl better. Obviously haven't seen every game she's played, and she, other people might feel that they've seen her bowl better at some other point, but definitely, although she's coming obviously towards the end of her career, but if she can keep going, she's not a player that's prone to injury, so she could still keep going. She could, James Anderson style, she could keep going for several more years and be a reliable performer. Her action and the way that she bowls isn't a particular, she doesn't look like she's going to be an injury prone bowler. And John Lewis has made that call that she's, if you're the best bowler in white ball cricket for ODIs, there's a good chance you're going to have, a good impact in the T20 game as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting. It feels a little bit like it is a bit of a critique of the previous regime, or a sense that actually England's preparation for this World Cup has been kind of less than ideal, in the sense of actually, if Kate Cross is going to play a major role with the ball, then it would have been good for her to have actually got some T20 international experience in the last 3 years. And so in a way, England are kind of taking a little bit of a gamble in that sense. Now, that's not to say that she can't perform very well, but it would have been preferable for her to have had some T20 international experience, and really, to have played in the Commonwealth Games, for example, ahead of Izzy Wong, if they were going to use her for the World Cup. So it's a little bit of John Lewis kind of stamping his mark and going, actually, I think that things weren't done quite the way that I would have done them under the previous regime, and I think you got that wrong. And that could possibly come back to bite England. I don't know. That's a slightly more pessimistic
I think she's an experienced player, and she'll be able to come in.
Okay.
She's played plenty of short form cricket matches in in domestic cricket, and I think that good players are good players, and I don't think that's going to inhibit her.
Okay.
So I think that might be perhaps more the case with a batter, but
okay. Let's talk about the batting then. Interesting to see that in all of the headlines, despite there being a lot of controversy over the inclusion of a certain Alice Capsey in a certain somebody's team of the year for 2022, in all of the headlines, Alice Capsey, the selection of Alice Capsey has been the big headline. She sells
Alice
newspapers.
Capsey is box office. She gets clicks. She sells newspapers.
So that's interesting, and they are obviously really desperately hoping that she is going to be fit. They've included her in the squad, and it's going to be, if she pulls it off, it's going to be a miracle, isn't it, Sid?
Yeah, no, I mean, given the extent of her injury, I mean, she had to have her shoulder rebuilt and bits of metal inserted into it. That's usually like a 3 or 4 month layoff. So if she can come back, I mean, maybe the rest of her's already made of metal, and she's actually the Iron Woman.
Well, it would explain how brilliant she is. I don't know. Fans of Capsey Bingo will be enjoying this episode.
Yeah, but no, I mean, obviously, as we've said before, she's clearly a very, very important part of their plans. And it's very interesting who they've included as a backup, isn't it? Because it shows why they think she's important. Yeah.
So Danny Gibson has been named as the second travelling reserve, and it's pretty clear that has been done with a view to, perhaps if Capsey doesn't quite make it, they see Gibson as a similar option with the bat. She can kind of come in and be very aggressive, be very attacking, and kind of force up the strike rates, I guess.
It's all about being able to score quickly from the off, because that's what's really needed. I mean, if Gibson does end up playing, she probably won't end up in the Capsey role opening or at number 3. She'll wind up down the order again. You'd have thought,
don't know.
But that's definitely a place where Maya Bouchier is doing similar things.
Yeah.
It's all about can I if I'm going to face only 5 balls, can I hit close to 10 runs in those 5 balls? And that's what someone like Gibson brings you. And if not, are you going to get out? And people will look back to the fact that Gibson got like 4 ducks in 100 last year. But in some ways, that's positive, right? Because in some ways, what you're seeing there is, well, she's not going to hang around.
Yeah.
I'd much rather she got 4 ducks than she had 4 innings where she got 4 or 5 runs for 20 balls each time.
That's really
that would clearly, and that's what's got her in there.
Yeah.
So.
How interesting. Potentially she could be fighting it out with a place with Maya Bouchier, because I note that Bouchier has been included in the squad despite not having been originally in the squad for the West Indies. She was brought in as cover when Capsey got injured, wasn't she?
Yeah, but again a very useful player. She came up really strongly in my stats for international white ball cricket last year as someone that's if you look at on a ball by ball basis, she really delivers. She's right up there with the Beth Moonies. She's not scoring a lot of big innings and she gets out a lot. But the bottom line is that if you're going to come in at 6 or 7 in a T20 towards the end of an innings, what you care about is that someone can score 10 runs in 5 balls. It doesn't really matter that person might get out after 5 balls. If they've scored that 10 runs, that's the job done.
So I think that's really interesting, because England have in a way gone into this World Cup with a little bit more of a settled or more experienced bowling lineup, but the batting is still very much TBC, depending on Capsey's fitness. Yeah, and we're not absolutely sure what the batting order is and that kind of thing. But
I think that there's a lot of quality players in there,
Yeah.
and if everyone can get into that mindset, and all the kind of the talk we're hearing is that John Lewis has done something to kind of change mindsets and to make people feel more positive and more confident. If they can just get in, start scoring runs from the off, then that's the key to it. And they've got plenty of players who can fire and deliver those big innings, and that gives them a chance. I mean, and it's all about giving yourself a chance in T20 cricket.
Great. Well, we'll have to see how they get on in February. So let's
and
talk about
T20 cricket.
Ah, yes. Well, I was wondering how you were going to segue, Sid. So we have been hearing some rumours, haven't we? And there's been a few stories this week about salaries in the forthcoming Women's IPL, except they're not calling it Women's IPL. Sid, tell us.
Well, they're just calling it the Women's Cricket League,
yeah.
Which is kind of really interesting about the BCCI's ambition. It's very much like the Premier League. Nobody needs to call it the English Premier League in men's football. It's the Premier League.
Yeah.
And the BCCI's ambition, I think, is to be the Women's Cricket League. Well, given some of the bonkers numbers that we're seeing. How's stuff coming out? Well, the BCCI made available some, invitations to tender for people that wants to run teams. And just to give you an idea of where they're at with these invitations to tender, kind of the scale of things we're talking about, it cost £5,000 just to see a copy of the document.
Yeah, we decided that we weren't going to try and get hold of a copy of the document because we didn't have a spare 5k lying around, sadly.
Just want to see the document? That's £5,000. Yeah. You don't get that back. There's
no.
There's no refund if you don't like it.
Nope.
That's what it costs. But obviously, some people did pay that money, presumably because they're thinking about going forward in that process. And some of that information has started to leak out. And the numbers being thrown around in terms of the salaries that players are going to earn, we were expecting that players would earn more, kind of per game, per day in the women's IPL or the WCL. It looks like it's going to be called. Presumably there'll be a sponsor's name on there, so it'll be something like the Pepsi Women's Cricket League. We were expecting it would be a bit more than they get paid for the 100 or for the Women's Big Bash, but these are bonkers amounts more. So the base price for the top Indian stars is 50 lakh. That's roughly £50,000. So that's the base price. None of those players are going to play it for that price. That's their kind of reserve price in terms of the women's IPL auction.
Okay.
So they are all going to earn way more than that. And in fact, the rumours are that the top level and the way that the salary caps are going to be, the average salary is going to be $300,000. Now there's a little bit of some mix up because we've seen some figures that are in US dollars, some figures that are in lakh, which is roughly £1,000. $300,000 on average, but some people will potentially be earning $1 million from competing in one women's IPL.
Wow, that's going to last a few weeks?
Yeah, and it's just an absolutely crazy amount more than they're earning in any other competition, and that's going to have a real impact on the game as a whole.
Just to make it clear, that's Indian. That's Indian
players.
Well,
it could be anybody. So the way the auction works is they'll bid up the teams will bid up the players that they really want.
So overseas players. Do we know how much they'll be earning?
It depends on what they get in the auction.
Okay.
But they stand to earn potentially those kinds of money. Right. So the very top stars, people like Beth Mooney or Elise Perry or Meg Lanning could walk away from this with a genuinely life-changing amount, which has never been available before in women's cricket.
That's staggering.
So previously we've seen people in the original women's T20 challenge, the one that was just one game, I reckon was probably about the best paid in terms of like money for the amount of minutes cricket that you played, and that got people sort of something in the region of £10,000. Okay. But we're talking like 100 times more than that. We're talking about enough to actually, if you're Heather Knight, you're looking at that going, well, I could pay off my mortgage from that.
We were kind of expecting this to happen at some point, but it's happening right now. It's going to happen from the very first women's IPL. Yeah,
and that's going to have an impact on the whole of the game, because suddenly you're going to see some players. This is the amounts of money which you're going to see. Danny White rocking up to her Porsche dealer in May and going. Yeah. Here's some cash for a new Porsche. Yeah. And it's also going to let's let's try and be honest about this. There's a lot of positives about it in terms of those individual players. That if you're able to pay off your mortgage and go and buy a Porsche on top of it, then that's fantastic for you. But there is going to be an impact across the rest of the game. That impact's going to be felt a little bit on a personal level. If there is a situation where some people are earning an absolutely bonkers amount more than other people, then that's actually possibly not a good thing. That's going to mean people are going to fight like cats in cages to get those full contracts in the Women's Cricket League, and that's going to it's going to bring up jealousies. It's going to bring up rivalries. And it's a difficult situation for anyone to be in. It's going to be a difficult situation for the players that win this, because they're going to have to come back into teams where suddenly they are they're living on a different planet to everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do. I'm sure that we've all seen that. I've seen friends from school that went off, and ended up earning way more than I ever did. And these people do end up on a different planet, and maintaining relationships with people when they're living on those different planets is difficult, because they just don't have the same lives that you do. So it's a life-changing amount, and that's not always positive. There are definitely some negatives that come with that, which are going to be difficult for people to deal with. But the other thing that's... Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, from a journalistic perspective, it makes me a bit nervous, because some of these players, as you say, are going to be operating on a different planet, on a different plane, and that's going to be the players who you're going to be most likely, newspapers are going to be wanting you to interview, and they're just going to be like, well, like, screw you, Raf Nicholson. Like, why should I give you the time of day? I'm off here with my Porsche and my, multi-million-pound house and lots of money on my bank account. And that makes me a bit anxious, because one of the things I've enjoyed about covering women's cricket is that the players are relatable, and that they are down to earth, and that even when they go and play like Beth Mooney does, she'll still say to me, "Oh, I just want to go under the radar, and I'm quite a kind of quiet individual going about my business." And you've just never got that sense of ego, and that's what concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a challenge and it's going to be a challenge for the teams as well. It's also going to be a big challenge for the boards and things, because this is going to be a destabilising influence on everything else. Let's think about this. Let's think about the WBBL. So the WBBL is taking place, around about the sort of pre-Christmas period. The Women's Cricket League is taking place in the post-Christmas period. Now, if you're a player, what are you going to prioritise there? And how are you going to prioritise that? Well, first of all, a most basic level, you're probably not going to want to... Are you going to even want to play in the WBBL? Because playing in the WBBL means risk of injury. Now, a risk of injury, playing in the WBBL, for any other player is, no one wants to get injured, but you take that risk and you go, well, okay, well, I'll take that risk, and if I get injured in WBBL, I might not be able to play this competition, or I might not be able to play that competition. But suddenly it becomes, if I get injured in the WBBL, I'm going to miss out on, on potentially earning hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm potentially going to miss out on being able to, pay off my mortgage or something. We're going to see people, one way or another, withdrawing from WBBL in order to play in this Women's Cricket League.
Yeah, I think that all of the other leagues in the world are under threat. You've particularly highlighted the WBBL. Similar will apply to the 100, similar will apply to these other leagues that are trying to establish themselves right now. The Caribbean Women's Premier League, the Pakistan Women's League. This is going to dwarf them all very quickly. And it's going to be, as you say, are people going to want to play in any of these other leagues anymore? I don't know. I think that's hard. And the other thing that's potentially then a threat, as we're seeing in men's cricket, is the international game. Are people actually going to keep playing international cricket when they could go off and earn a staggering amount of money just by playing in like 2 or 3 women's IPLs?
Yeah, and the boards are going to be under extreme pressure to give out no objection certificates for this, because the players are just going to... effectively what's going to happen if the boards don't give out NOCs for this is that the players are just going to go on strike. They're just going to go, well, I'm not playing then. If you tried to say to a current England player, I'm not giving you an NOC, then they've got the chance to earn $800,000 or $1 million in this WCL, they're just going to go, well, sorry, I'm retiring because that's going to pay off my mortgage.
Yeah.
It's
more
a huge
than they'll earn
difference
for England in a career.
In one women's IPL, one WCL, you'll be able to earn more than you have in your entire England career. So the players are going to be in a position to just go, no, I'm not doing that. In terms of like the other domestic leagues, for the 100, for example, England will be able to make their players play in the 100, contractually, but they won't necessarily be able to persuade them to necessarily put in kind of the same effort, and you will get more players, just effectively going on strike by going mental health break.
Yeah.
And obviously, there are situations where people need those mental health breaks, but there are gonna be situations then where people are just going, well, I want a mental health break, because they're not interested in playing in a competition, because they know that the absolutely, and it's not just that. This is the thing. It's not just 10 times more. It's 100 times more than they will earn for any of these other competitions. And that disparity, I think, is too much. And this is going to cause long-term, big long-term changes in where the game is at.
I mean, we would like to think of ourselves as being on the side of the players, right? So you might go, okay, you should be really excited at the prospect of women earning this amount of money through cricket. But what we're saying is, I guess, that we don't want women's cricket to replicate what men's cricket is doing or what men's sport is doing, and creating these enormous disparities.
It's the disparities that are
the
the key.
people at the top who are just earning stupid amounts of money that they don't know what to do with, and the little people. And that just kind of creates a huge rift and causes difficulties of its own. And actually, what we'd want is for the money, if there is this money in women's cricket that suddenly India seem to have discovered behind the sofa, then can't we spread it out somehow? Can't we make things a bit more equitable? And that doesn't seem to be what the approach that's being taken.
No,
here.
it's very much a reflection of the kind of winner takes all society that that we've been developing over the last 30 years, and I'm just not convinced that of itself is healthy. So the money coming into the sport is brilliant, but we'd very much like to see it more evenly distributed.
Yeah, and really, this is something that some of the players you'd hope might speak out about potentially. Also, FICA, as the international kind of players union, should really be advocating for a model that doesn't look like this, because yes, some of their players may get very rich, but a lot of their other players won't, and won't see any of the benefits of this. So FICA need to be, where are they in this? Why have they not done anything? I mean, I guess this is early days, but you would hope that FICA will take an advocacy role in this. And I don't know. It's difficult, because in women's cricket we've developed a culture of, well, you put up and shut up, and you just play, and you don't think about these wider issues, or if you do, you're not allowed to say that you're thinking about them.
Never complain, never explain.
Yeah.
In the immortal words of the Queen Mother.
Exactly. So you just kind of get on with it, and you may have views and you may have opinions, but you don't feel like you can really say them. And a lot of what happens on women's players' social media accounts is very sanitised, because they're worried about the board looking over their shoulders and everything like that. But actually, this is a situation where we would really like some of the players to speak out and say that they're not happy with this. And what it would be quite a statement if somebody like Heather Knight, who potentially could get one of these really big contracts, could turn around and say, well, actually, I have principles and I don't think this is a good idea for women's cricket as a whole. But are we going to see that? Who knows? It's going to be an interesting few months, but I feel quite anxious about it.
Well, we'll see.
It's kind of one of those be careful what you wish for, it may come true moments. We've been wanting a women's IPL and asking for one for like 5 years, and now it's happening, and it's a bit weird. It's a brave new world or something. Anyway, that was a bit of a downbeat note to end on. Just to say, ahead of next week's episode, that's going to be brought to you a little bit later than usual, because we are going to watch England under-19's first match of the World Cup, which is against Zimbabwe, I believe. That's next Sunday, so we're going to watch that, and then we are going to bring you the podcast after that with our reactions. And hopefully at that point we'll know who the captain is, because if we don't, something's gone very wrong. All right, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we will see you in a week's time.
Bye.